What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Building with Mods. We're back at Red Rocket. It's time to finish off the wall, and as you can see, we got some pretty interesting things going on. This isn't going to be just a normal standard wall. It's pretty interesting. So basically we're going to go from this to this. If you remember, in the last episode we built the gate, which turned out pretty cool, and if you haven't seen that, check out the first video for Red Rocket. And with that said, let's get building. To begin the wall, I placed a bus with a full van on top and a van with the top completely ripped off, which I placed a guard tower into. Then I used the guard railing and some sandbags to add some extra protection, before adding stairs up to the guard post. I dumped a load of cars in the corner before adding a fence around the outside of the bus, using the chain link fences and of course the junk fences. I added a gravel wall just to mix stuff up before adding a shit ton of tires. If you remember, in the first part, these guys are basically car Mad Max inspired lunatics, so I'm going to be using a lot of vehicles, metal and obviously tires as well, just to fit in kind of the theme. So if you're wondering why I'm repeating a lot of stuff, it's that's the theme I'm going for, and that makes it more natural and more realistic. I shimmied around some of the tires so they weren't clipping through the fence before fencing off the other side. The fences don't quite line up, and I had some junk fences there, which I find makes it look more natural and realistic rather than just built in a video game. Moving on to the other side of the gates, I placed another bus, making sure I filled in the gap with random items to stop any enemies from getting inside. Then I placed a shit ton of spikes along the outside of the bus. Then jumping to the other side of the bus, I added some support beams, which turned out pretty good. Then building up the wall, I added a container, a truck and 2 more buses. This is probably gonna be a sleeping quarter, but I'm not too sure yet. There was a tiny gap, so I just used spiked poles again just to fill in and stop anybody from entering. Moving on, I dropped in 2 more containers, filled in a gap with spikes and used the cinder block stairs to support the bus on top. Then by placing a load of cages and some support beams, I was able to break up the hard edges of the wall. As these walls would be very unstable, especially in a storm, I added some support beams along the bottom and made sure I filled in any gaps for support. And again, using them spiked poles to block any way in. And to finish off the support, I placed 2 horizontal beams just to block the gap underneath the bus. It's very small and probably not even that noticeable, but for me it makes the difference. Then I took a step back, something I would recommend to anybody who's building anything. From time to time, take a step back, see what you build, see if you like it, see if it's going in the direction you wanted, and if it is, you can continue to build, and if it's not, make them changes now, as it's a lot easier than moving on and having to come back and mess everything around. I was pretty happy, so I ended up moving on and adding stairs so you're able to get to the top bus. Making sure I added boards and fences to make sure the stairs transitioned nicely from the ground, as it's clipping into it, and it kind of just looks odd when it's just going into the ground with nothing around it. I didn't want the wall to just be all cars and crates and buses. I wanted to mix it up a little bit, make it more realistic, so I ended up adding some chain link fences around this bottom corner, using spiked poles just to add another look to the fence. I chucked down a load more spikes again before adding some support beams to the rear of the fence so people can't force it down. To break up this area, I added some cages, a gravel wall and some guardrails before placing a mountain of tires again, which I think really brings this build together in this wall. I'm not going to really use this kind of style again. I like to keep my settlements a little bit different, but this is a style I really want to use throughout this build. For the smaller rear gate of this settlement, I used some garage doors and I used wall dividers just to connect it and smooth it out on the floor. I used some metal ridge floors to smooth out the floor a little bit and some shack roofs above it. I'm not too sure if I'm going to keep this, but it's just there for now. I took a quick break from the wall because I was kind of running out of ideas, to be honest, and added a shit ton of lights inside the gate, which looks pretty cool in the night. I also added an exit sign with some red industry lights. Getting back to building the wall, I added some fence in a straight line, which ain't that interesting, but it does what it does, making sure I filled in any gaps below with more fences. Getting a little bit more interesting, I placed down the military vehicle, grabbed the already existing truck and moved it in behind it, which actually fitted really well. I chucked down another broken bus before filling in the gap with a tank, because why not? I added a few more vehicles to the wall before adding some barriers to mix stuff up and then just going crazy with tires again. Even though there's less than a handful of tire walls, I end up mixing them up a little bit, rotating them, placing them high and lower, which I think really breaks them up because you can't really see much of a repeating texture. To break up the wall and fill in some of them gaps, I did some junk fences before spamming a load of spikes again. And I know this build has basically been like 90% spamming spikes and tires, but that's the theme I'm going for and it kinda just fits the settlement. Then to finish off the main structure of the wall, I just used junk fences. Pretty simple, but it keeps with the theme while still adding quite a lot to the build. So nobody can get into the windows of the bus, I used some metal sheets and some chain link fences, before using the guard tower to cover the front of the bus, which works really well. I then filled in the gaps with a guard post and some junk fences. Then, to finish off this build, I just boarded up the bus. I added a roof board that I normally do to the steps, just to make it look like it used to be used, but then got boarded up. And that's it guys, the wall is completed. And in the next episode, I'm not too sure what we're going to be doing because I haven't even actually started filming it or even building it. But I got kind of an idea of what I'm going to do. So I'm probably going to make a start on that straight after recording this. And before I leave you and say farewell, I just want to say again, thanks a lot for doing what you're doing by liking, viewing, subscribing, commenting. It's pretty amazing. It keeps me motivated to make these videos and keep building. So I just wanted to say thank you so much. So if you liked the video, please hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and for now, goodbye.